Hi, everybody. Hi, everybody. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the Talking About the Big Stuff podcast with Michael Cole and Matthew Cravat. I am Michael Cole.
And I am Matthew Cravat.
The first record of 2024. Not the first episode to come out this year, but for our first. Yeah.
So isn't it kind of a chord then? I mean, we're not recording, we're just chording for the first time.
Yeah. And somebody forgot to turn his fucking ringer off.
Ooh, that person's a dick.
Yeah. Before we get into the topic, I would just... Sorry, I'm trying to send Sarah the Fandango pass. So
it reminds me of when on my honeymoon, every night of my honeymoon went like this. Hey, honey, why don't you try on another piece of lingerie that somebody got you as a wedding present? And she'd go in the bathroom and she'd try it on. She'd come out and model it. I go, that's really nice. But put the one that Nancy gave you back on. Literally every night.
Yeah. Nice.
Thanks, Nancy.
So tonight's topic is going to be... I'm not sure how we want to word it. I worded it in the chat. Privileged allyship, and you pointed out, and I think in a good way, that all allyship is privileged. Why don't you rebut the claim the way you did?
No, I'm just saying that for your allyship to really be beneficial, often it is leveraging your privilege for a group that is marginalized and doesn't have as much privilege.
Right.
So not being a white knight necessarily and saying, I'm the hero to be here, but to amplify those voices, to, help share, give them on stages they couldn't otherwise get on, platforms they couldn't get on, retweeting people to your audience, having conversations like this where other people may not have the opportunity to have the conversation.
Yeah, I think it's hard. It's hard to have. It's a hard balance to strike between, like you said, white knighting, and also there is an extent, and maybe this is a different kind of white knighting, but like there's an extent to which I think a lot of us, like allies, want to. It almost becomes a like the voice of kind of, which is part of white knighting, but like to me, I will, I don't want to like take the lead when I'm an ally in general, and I don't want that to be taken as passive or lazy, or you know what I'm saying, like I don't want it to be.
I mean, it's a fine line between being an ally and making it about you, and being like, I'm offended on behalf of these other people because I chose to be offended, and I think that's what people make fun of, and that people annoys people, and I get that. I think that to me there's two things that are important. One is that I don't think I am an ally for anyone. I strive to be one. It's not my place to say I'm an ally.
Yeah.
It's the group you're helping who say yes, you've been one. So it's a never ending journey of trying to be a good ally, hoping to earn the title. But I think it's the key word. And I think what I said earlier was amplifying. Like my job is not to speak for people; it's to amplify their message to an audience that might not otherwise hear it.
Yes, I agree with you completely. I have two things I want to add kind of to it. One is, I think that especially when you talk about, you guys go to protests, and obviously I haven't really been to protests, but I like adding my face to the crowd on a lot of those, because I think it becomes easy, and maybe maybe race is not the right discriminated group to talk about this with, or because we're, I would say
that's a big thing. Being a white male has a lot of privilege, so that's a good point.
But being there, like it's easy to dismiss. We hear a lot of anti-trans rhetoric dismissing it as this tiny minority, and like this tiny minority, and obviously I'm not trans, I'm cisgendered, but like the idea of standing with them and being not only bolstering their numbers, but also saying like this matters to me. This matters to me because I don't know who around me is trans or is not trans, and the idea of just making sure that people are treated as best as possible is important to me for all the reasons it should be important to everyone. And so my face being there, and if someone asked me to speak, that would be different. But at the same time, I get worried about being the face in the background while a trans person, if we're at a trans thing, or if we were or just LGBT in general, um, or if I was a white person in Black Lives Matter marches, or those kind of things. To me, that my face being there lends it the credibility of, this isn't a niche group. This isn't just. I mean,
it doesn't just affect the group that is being targeted.
yeah,
It
I'm
affects
not wording it
everyone.
right,
We're
but yes,
all
that's perfect.
we're one community, and we didn't support you.
Yeah,
I mean, and I've had the situation you were kind of getting at when I have gone as a representative of my atheist group. We've gone to many memorials for gun victims and rallies and protests for um, better gun laws and such. And I am not an expert on that topic. I am knowledgeable on it. My wife and daughter are experts on that topic. And there are times people have come to our table and kind of challenged us on why we're there. And and I'll say, well, I'm main reason that we are here is because in a situation like this, I mean, we're talking about victims, people sometimes go to their church group as their social support network because they need that community, and not everyone has that community. We want people to know we're here as that community for those people.
yeah,
As one reason. The other reason is because we, as people who are humanists and care about the state of the people in our community, are concerned about this issue and want to show that we support this issue. And then I've had people follow up with, well, what do you think of the top 3 things we should do legislatively? And I've said, you know what? That's a great question. Let me walk you over to someone who's better qualified to answer it, because my job is to support the experts, not to be the expert.
yeah,
And I don't even take a shot. I mean, I know the things my wife is going to say, but it's not my stage. Like, that's the point where my allyship is to, you want to stick a camera in my face, or do you want to come up and start a conversation? I will bring you to the person you should be talking to, and it's not
yeah,
me.
yeah, yeah. I agree with that. I also, and that's a really good way of doing it, because one thing that has made me leery of not of helping, of overstepping, is during Black Lives Matter, during the, I think it was the George Floyd protests, most that I can remember best. But there were these comments. I remember hearing that the black protesters were being quiet, or being reasonable and peaceful, and and then there was white people who were protesting with them, who were probably not intentionally
But they have the privilege of not being worried that they're going to get shot, so they can be more
exactly, so they were
aggressive.
being obnoxious, or they were being aggressive, or and they were ruining the thing that was happening by being overzealous, and trying to I think that they're probably well intentioned, most of those people, although there were probably some there to fuck with shit too.
Yeah, there certainly were, yeah.
But I
But I'm
think
sure
there
you're
are.
pretty right. There's probably both things were there. Yeah.
Right, and I think so. For me, like, if I were to go to something like that, I would be trying to be no louder than any other
Yeah. You
person,
take
and
your
trying to not.
cues from the people who are running the thing that you're at. If you're not the
Yeah,
host, you take your cues from your host, the same way as if you were in someone's house.
yeah,
You don't come in and live your life there. You take your cues from the host.
yeah, yeah. And I think when you look at it, like, if Sarah asked me to go get her tampons, I would go look at the tampons she has in the thing, and I would say, "Are these good? Can I get this kind, or whatever?" And I would go get them. Or if I didn't have that option,
If you
I
were
would.
a good husband, you would tell her what the better brand was.
Yeah.
The store brand is on sale, honey.
This one has
You're getting Absorbios. They're on
absorbent.
sale.
Yeah. I was. Did you listen to that citation needed about the bad products? And they had the failed products too. It was about a month ago.
I'm sure I did because I listened to all of them, but
Oh yeah.
for me to recollect it in a moment.
They were talking about they had some compound that they were using in tampons in the like
Oh,
late
toxic shock
70s,
syndrome from it, yeah.
and it not that toxic syndrome can't happen otherwise, but it was
But
so
that's when it got a
bad for
name. Yeah.
it was so bad
Yeah.
for and it's funny because that hasn't been on the market. That product hasn't been on the market basically in my life, but when I first started dating my first girlfriend, I learned about toxic shock syndrome, and it's like every guy knows about it because of the scare of that. And regular tampons basically don't do that unless there's something else wrong.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's
It's
just
a really small chance where when that product was on the market, it was a pretty good chance.
yeah. But what was I saying? Oh, the tampon thing. Like, I just think that I don't know. I don't know what's the best for that. I wouldn't get that. I would pick what she wanted me to pick up for her. Bra wise, I don't know what her cup
How often
size
does your
is
wife
or
say,
her.
"Hey, run out and buy me a bra"?
I'm just my point being, if you were
While you're at the drugstore, pick me up a couple of D cups, honey.
get some tampons, you know what I'm saying? I'm trying to think of things that do not affect me that I would be willing to, I'd be fine with doing if I was just in the area. Because I mean, you don't know this maybe, but women's bras, because of the underwire in the dryer and stuff, can have some significant. They can break all of a sudden. So Sarah's had emergency bra situations. So
You know what? If you were a better husband, you would let her have her bra budget to buy more than one at a time. She shouldn't just own one bra at a time.
I think
I don't want to tell you how to live your life, how to do your marriage, but she should have two bras. She should own two bras.
I think it's fun that you think that I set the budget in this household. Sarah makes more than twice what I make. Sarah is the one setting all the budget.
Well, then you tell her that you approve of her owning more than one bra. So,
Well,
honey, I know you send me out 3 times a week to buy bras the last minute. Maybe this is the wrong approach.
yeah.
Yeah, I think something's wrong if you're reusing your tampons and throwing away your bras after each use. Something's mixed up in the house. I'm just saying. There's a little bit of confusion.
Yeah.
One of those things is disposable and one is not meant to be.
Yeah. Anyway, back to allyship and privileged allyship.
So anyway,
I have I've had the benefit of not being an ally, so I haven't had to worry about this too much. No, I will say I remember when I was helping Leah make her music video a few years ago. We were driving around, and I remember saying something that as soon as I said it, I was like, "Oh, you probably sound like a fucking douchebag." And I said, but I didn't mean it in a douchebag way. We were talking about something political, and I said, I just think as a cis white man, while as far as at that point in time, Logan was 3.5 years old, and so he's also a cis white man as far as I know, a hetero cis white man. I said, while I'm in this stage where I am fairly comfortable because of all those things, I feel like I feel like it's important for me to live somewhere that could potentially have some real problems in elections, and then use my vote correctly. Like, meaning, because at that point, North Carolina is not by far not the worst state in a lot of but we for a little while we were the poster child. It was before I got here, but North Carolina was the poster child for kind of the trans bathroom bills, and like we were.
yeah.
And I remember thinking, like, when I moved down, people kept saying to me, "You're a liberal and you're going to go live in North Carolina," and I'm like, "Yeah, my
I
vote
would
will
remind
help."
them the
Hopefully.
reason that the story behind the trans bathroom bill, though, was that it started with Charlotte City Council passed a rule protecting trans people's rights in the bathroom, and then the state freaked out. Like it started as
Oh,
it was the progressive movement doing a good thing, and then the conservatives freaking out and making it evil.
I didn't know that,
Yeah.
but
I think like we caused the whole our North Carolina caused the entire trans bathroom bill thing, and it was because they were saying, "Hey, in city buildings in Charlotte, use the bathroom you want to use." Like it was a Charlotte rule for their city buildings,
oh yeah,
and that's when the state said, "No, no, no, we're going to overrule you. We don't believe in cities' rights, just states' rights because we own the state."
yeah. But the point being, and I don't remember how I worded it, but I remember thinking, "Oh, you sound like a giant douche." But my point that I was trying to make was, like, I ultimately, and this is going to sound douchey again, if something really bad happens legislatively, it will likely impact me least. So it is my it is my duty to live somewhere where that's a real possibility, and then to help work against it. Where as opposed to like if you're a trans person, I would not have any. I would understand completely if you were a trans person. You're like, I don't want to live in Florida because, or I'm a gay person. I don't want to live in Florida because I potentially can have some very real world consequences, and it sucks because then Florida loses your vote as a hopefully liberal, progressive,
It makes the
gay or
marginalized
trans
community
person.
even more of a minority if people leave.
Yeah,
But it's
and so
understandable that one would leave.
right,
Yeah.
and so that's why when it comes down to it, like in those places where it can be like that, it is important for us to listen so that we understand as best as we can possibly understand what the best course of voting action is for us, to do to help trans and gay communities, to help the Black community, to help whatever marginalized community where our community is most likely to negatively affect, and then to try to do that. And like ultimately, if we if North Carolina becomes a state that bans abortions, it's not that likely to affect me directly. I mean, I am married to a woman who is of an age where she can still get pregnant. So there are ways in which it will, but not as it's just not the
But
same
at
thing
worst
for
case
me.
scenario, it would mean you guys would have to take a trip up north for a weekend.
Yeah, which isn't
Because you have the money and the ability to do that, so it doesn't affect you.
and a place to stay.
Yeah.
Like, but yes, so like there are all these different things kind of, and so I think it's really important for us, but it's also in that same way important for us to not. We need to.
I mean, if you take that to the next step, you shouldn't be living in Wake County. You should move, or at least you should be in like Fuquay Varina, where the Reds outnumber the Blues, and your vote makes more of an impact than it does in Cary, where you're one of the majority.
Yeah, I agree,
Just saying,
but it
preferring.
wasn't entirely the reason I voted down or moved down here. Is just it is
But
its
it is
consideration.
a solid thing. It's yeah, there's a reason not to leave because of politics. Is
Yeah,
I'm not in danger and maybe I can help.
yeah.
Yeah. So I'll say, if you want to make a difference, if you want to help get out the vote or go door to door or do phone banking or anything like that, we could do more good doing it for the other counties than for Wake County. Like
Yeah.
the candidates who are in a place where they're at a challenge need our help more than our representatives and senators
Sure.
who are in a good place.
That makes sense. And as far as gerrymandering, it can be if us spreading out and being, can help too. If I'm living in,
well, it's one of the reasons that we're all unaffiliated, registered unaffiliated, my family, because we don't want the gerrymanderers looking at what we actually are. And knowing, I mean, they can see your voting records. They can see, for primaries, which primary you vote in, but that's not 100% accurate because we once went door knocking on people who are either Democrats or voted the Democrat primary, and we got a door slammed in our face, offended. So like, oh, clearly those people who we know on their records they vote in the Democratic primary, the husband and the wife, they must do it as a spoiler because they were upset. And we said, "Are you going to vote for Joe Biden?" They were like, "What? Never!" Slam the door. So.
Oh, I should vote. I should vote in the primary this year, the Republican primary, because
if you're unaffiliated, you can. If you're a Democrat, you get a Democrat. If you're a Republican, you get a Republican. If you're unaffiliated, you can choose which ballot
I'll
you
have
want.
to change my registration and do that. Although I don't even know who's in the field still. I know that. I think Ron DeSantis hasn't fallen out or dropped out.
We don't bother with the spoiler thing because I don't think a vote makes a difference in their primary. It's
I wouldn't. But I honestly, here's the thing: I wouldn't do it for a spoiler. I would do it. I wouldn't just go, "Oh, this is the person I think is going
Trump is
to."
a special case.
I wouldn't go vote and say this is the person I think has the worst shot. I would go and say I think this is the person who will do the least damage.
Right. Yeah.
If
a Republican's going to win, this is who I prefer it to be.
Yeah. Which I don't know.
Well, yeah.
Maybe Nikki Haley. I don't know.
I mean, but on the presidential level, sure. But I could see where Josh Stein, the leading Democratic candidate for governor in North Carolina right now, probably prefers to go up against Mark Robinson, who is a wacko loon, on the
Oh yeah.
Republican side than his closest competitor, who is just a typical conservative Republican. So, like from our standpoint, we might say, just in case a Republican wins, I don't want it to be Robinson. I'd rather have it be this guy who's just a regular conservative. But from Josh's standpoint, who wants the Democrats to win, he wants to go on against the easier to beat, or who he thinks is easier to beat. We learned from 2016 Trump that's not necessarily the case.
Yeah, and I also think I think that's a fair strategic point, but I also think like, look, I think John McCain, for example, probably was more of a hawk than I would like, and had a lot of issues. But if I had to pick between John McCain winning in 2008 or Donald Trump winning ever, I would pick John McCain. Yeah, yes, I think John McCain up against a lot of these candidates would have had a better shot. But I also think John McCain
Right.
is a way more, we can live with that a lot better than we can live with a Trump or a Ted Cruz or a Ron DeSantis. Ted Cruz isn't in it, but he has been. But I
yeah. I mean, that's why I say we don't go probably because we don't play the spoiler game, or the vote for the other person. We're like, let you pick who you want to pick. We'll go up against them.
yeah, I wish that more Republicans had gone spoiler vote and gone Elizabeth Warren or Bernie. That'd have been awesome if they had like tried.
Yeah, by the time it got to North Carolina, it was Biden. Like it wasn't. They weren't even choices anymore. I mean, they were on the ballot, but they'd already, weren't going to win.
Yeah, although I say that, but I also think that Biden is doing a significantly better job than I expected.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want it to sound bad. I think that when you look at, not that I want to compare the like surrogate for a candidate, which we do see a lot of, but I think there can be an overlap there with allyship, in which sometimes you get a surrogate who goes out there and is a real fucking moron, and I think we need to avoid you
don't
damaging.
Let someone speak for you.
Yeah. Well, and I think that sometimes it's unavoidable.
It's really just not a real surrogate. It's you're watching CNN and they have a guy from the left and a guy from the right, and they're not part of either candidate's organization, but they're speaking for them whether you like it or not. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there's that, but there's also like if you're President Biden, you have to rely on the the cabinet to. Buttigieg talks about transportation, and you have to
right, but you shouldn't
have
Biden
cabinet coming out talking about. But agreed, you should not have them in your cabinet if they can't. That's a good point.
Because I think it's perfectly valid to judge a president by their cabinet. Who do they appoint? Like that's that's one of the things Trump did terrible with. He put all crooks in charge. Everyone's been arrested who was in his cabinet, except oddly enough, Linda McMahon from WWF, WWE wrestling. She was in charge of Small Business Council or whatever, and no scandals. Like she got appointed, she did her job, she left. Like,
is she Vince's wife or daughter
or
what?
Vince's wife.
Oh
yeah, and it was like no scandal. Like she's a competent. She was the head of the company more than Vince was. Vince was the face, but she's the business person. Like she was qualified. She's a conservative, but she was completely qualified for the job. She did the job, no scandals, left the job. Of all people, the wrestler was the one who was the best qualified person in the cabinet.
Until you just mentioned her, I 100% forgot that he has been on like WWE.
He's in the Hall of Fame.
And was he ever? Did they ever let like someone like that become the champion?
Someone like that, not him, but yeah, David Arquette was a champion at one point.
That'd be hilarious if the president of the United States was also the former heavyweight champion of the world.
He was at WrestleMania and he like beat on Vince. I think he a little story where he knocked Vince down and beat Vince up, and but he actually didn't actually get in the ring and fight anyone.
Nice.
But they could do it easily enough. I mean, because the WWE has had storylines where it's like 24 hours a day, anytime you can just attack the champion and go for the belt. So they've had people who just finished an hour match and then gets attacked by somebody like while they're having their hand raised. Somebody jumps up and attacks them when they're half dead already, and someone fresh beats them and gets their title. There was one pay-per-view where the title changed 3 hands during the pay-per-view because people kept like, change hands 3 times during the pay-per-view because people kept attacking out of nowhere.
I was watching a comedian. I'm going to look him up because I like him and I want people to watch him. But I was watching him on Instagram and he was saying that he likes wrestling. He likes like WWE wrestling, and that he goes, "Don't say that in a Hollywood party. People will look at you like super offended that you said that. Like, you know that's fake, right?" And he's like, "Well, here's the deal. I've been watching TV and it seems to be all fake."
Yeah, I was
The
always say
Bachelor.
that. I say to my parents, my father would say something. I'm like, "Dad, do you think Captain Kirk really fought a giant alligator guy? Because that's fake." He goes, "Yeah, but," I said, "Did you think he was going to win or lose?" I'm like, "Well, I knew he was going to win." What's the difference? It's General Hospital, except instead of at a hospital, it's at a wrestling ring, and they actually do their own stunts.
Yeah. Okay, so I don't know how you
So,
pronounce his last name. It's Danny. I'm guessing Jolles. It's Jolles. Could be Holles, but I don't know. But he's hilarious. You should all watch him. He's very funny. But yeah, he said that about, and then he was saying The Bachelor. There's a producer off screen telling them what to say and do. Like,
yeah, no. Only regular sports is not like, because you're getting it confused with sports. It's not sports; it's entertainment. With
and art and maybe the news.
Well, no,
maybe.
I saw a clip from another comedian. I just looked up Danny real fast, make sure it wasn't him, who did a similar routine recently about how he got in an argument with his girlfriend over wrestling, and and how they're not real actors. And he's like, "What about The Rock?" And she's like, "What? The Rock's not a wrestler anymore. What's his name?" She's like, "It's The Rock." I'm like, "No, that's a character he played."
Yeah,
like,
you're referring to him as the character.
As his character name. I mean, what other actor do you do that with?
I saw that clip. I forget who that was, but yeah, that's hilarious. Yeah.
Yeah, my family has gotten back into wrestling just recently because for some reason Jacob did, of all people, the oldest. I don't think like he just watched some old clips on YouTube and it served up new clips, so he started watching. And for his Hanukkah present to Joseph is in February. Um, one of the wrestling pay-per-view or just SmackDown or something's going to be in Charlotte, one of the live events, and so Joseph's hopping on a train and going down to Charlotte, and Jacob is taking him to the taping. Nice. And so Jacob's been watching regularly to catch up and everything. So now Joseph's starting to rewatch again, and he had stopped watching politically. We got rid of WWE Network because WWE was supporting Saudi Arabia after the Crown Prince had a reporter killed. They were still supporting Saudi government. My kids were like, "I can't see paying for this anymore. Cancel it."
Gotcha.
But and then I think my friend Elliot, who was almost on the podcast, he called in once. And sorry, everybody, you didn't get to hear him because the audio got screwed up. But Elliot is taking Joseph and Leah to see. I think Raw is going to be in Raleigh in a couple of weeks, so he's taking them to see it.
Nice. You just brought up something that I think is interesting. That part of allyship that I want to mention. So you said the thing about not paying for WWE because they support the Saudi Crown Prince or government. That is something that I have a hard time with. So
I know you're on a list. I know you're limited to which things you can support and not
No.
support.
It is going the opposite direction from where I think you think it's going. I have a hard time when, like, I don't eat Chick-fil-A, and I don't think you eat Chick-fil-A. But I know, like, almost, I think every gay person I know is like, yeah, I eat Chick-fil-A. I mean, I don't know that many gay people, but, like, I feel like it's like sometimes it's like, okay, well, like, and actually better yet is I am arguably more of a feminist than Sarah, her sister, and all of Sarah's friends. And they will all tell you that I am more of a feminist because they're all like, yeah, I don't want a woman to be president. I don't think a woman should be president. I don't, and like, they just start saying, Sarah's less so about this, but like, you hear it and you're like, oh, it's so uncomfortable. And I'm like,
every bad decision a president has ever made was made by a male president. I'm just saying.
Yeah. But I find it, that's one thing that I think is tough is when you're like, no, I think that I'm right. And I think that I need to take this principled stand. And I will say that I've been trying to be less vocal about the Chick-fil-A thing. When people go to Chick-fil-A, I only say shit to people I know get that I'm like half joking. Like,
I think part of it though is you're more political than any of those people are. That's why you're
true,
more feminist.
that's
It's
true.
not because you believe feminism more. It's because you're more aware of the greater situation rather than someone's one personal anecdote of what their life
Oh
is
yeah,
like.
yeah.
But like I had
Me,
that with Chick-fil-A when I used to teach improv comedy at a all girls school, and which eventually went co-ed while we were there. But at first it was all girls school, and there was a lesbian thespian who was taking our classes, and she walks in one day eating Chick-fil-A, and I was like, "What are you doing?" She's like, "What?" I'm like, "How can you eat Chick-fil-A?" She's like, "What do you mean?" And I had to pull up articles on my phone, and she had no idea because she's not politically active. Like she had no
yeah,
idea what Chick-fil-A was doing. And then she's like, "Am I allowed to finish this? It was free. They were giving it away at the student center." I'm like, "Yeah, you can finish that, but don't help create demand for it unless you want to." I mean,
yeah,
but just just choose where your dollars go. I'm not telling you what to do, but I'm just
yeah.
surprised. But it's really
Well,
not that she would have supported them had she known. She just was a college student and didn't pay attention to politics and didn't know.
yeah, I will say that with most of the people I'm talking about, that is not the case. They are aware. I have because we've talked about it, and they just don't give a fuck. And that's tough.
It's like
Set,
I have a
set,
friend who donates money to Equality NC, a pro LGBTQ group in North Carolina. Every time that he has Chick-fil-A at like a catered event, like a work lunch, and they have Chick-fil-A, he afterwards donates money to offset the money that was spent on his Chick-fil-A.
nice. Um, we went to Raising Cane's in Massachusetts last week. My nephews and my sister-in-law, and she was like, "Yeah, it's really really good. It's definitely like better than almost anything else, but it's not as good as Chick-fil-A." And I was like, just chicken taste for chicken taste. I'm like, you're right. This is not as good tasting as Chick-fil-A. But doesn't it feel nice to know that this isn't like giving money to anti-gay stuff and like this chicken doesn't taste like a hatred? And then I was like, maybe the hatred's what makes it taste good. I don't know.
Yeah. You can taste
but
the love in every bite. You can taste the hate in every bite.
yeah, but she's funny because she's one of the people I can say that to. There are other people I will not talk about Chick-fil-A to because they get upset about. Like they'll be like, I just want to have my chicken, and I'm like, okay. Like I do try not to be like a buzzkill all the time. But all right, what are we talking about?
Theoretically, allyship. You keep going off
Allyship.
talking about Chick-fil-A. I don't know.
I think that was somewhat related.
It is,
It's more consumer ally. It's more
right.
like it's a
I
different type of protest.
I don't want my dollar being used
Yeah,
passed through to be used direct. I mean, there are things you know that most businesses give more to Republican candidates than not. So you got to choose your battles.
yeah.
But when you know that they specifically target a group, it's a different story.
Sarah and I had the Chick-fil-A conversation yesterday, and she said, and she's not on board with protesting, and but she said like, well, most companies like do bad stuff, and I'm like, yeah, I would imagine that's absolutely true. That most companies do something that I would not want to give money to. However, there is a difference when you know. I was like, it's just like there's
And it's
probably
specific.
I
They
said,
don't just give money to politics because they want laws passed that support them. They give money.
yeah, yeah,
They lobby for anti-gay laws.
yeah. I said something. I said, like
I say they, and it was really the owner of the company, Robert Cathey. He
yeah,
personally did it with his share of the money. It wasn't the company's budget, but his
yeah,
share of the money that he gets from the company.
yeah. I said, my example that I used for her was like, yeah, like I really liked the Cosby Show when I was a kid. It's ruined now that I know, but like he was doing that the whole time. But now that I know, I can't enjoy watching him.
Yeah.
Like that is the difference. Is like, and I get it. There is like an inherent feeling of helplessness to kind of admit that, but ultimately you can only do what you know about. Like,
Yeah. And I mean, and then the song, I think we talked about this when we talked about is it the singer or the song,
yeah,
that kind of thing. Was there's somewhere it's like I just can't enjoy Cosby. It's not a choice. It's just if I see Bill Cosby performing,
yeah,
what pops to my head is Bill Cosby performing, and I can't enjoy it. Versus like my wife hates Tom Cruise because of his his stance on postpartum depression being a woman just not being able to deal with it, and she should just take more vitamins and crap. And his feud with Brooke Shields over it years and years ago, and she just will not watch a Tom Cruise movie. She used to like, Top Gun was one of her top 3 favorite movies, and she will never watch it again. And I can watch a Tom Cruise movie. Like we don't want to give him money, so I don't go to a movie. But
Yeah.
I don't mind watching one of his movies because I'm not so I don't have the response that she does. But I won't spend money because I support her.
Can we just admit though that the real problem with Tom Cruise is that he has one center tooth? That's the biggest crime.
He's a can opener.
I don't know. Somebody at work told me that she can't get over the fact that instead of having like 2 front teeth, he has like all his teeth are like slightly off, so he has one center tooth.
Snuggles.
I have to Google it now because it sounds crazy once I just said it out loud.
As I started typing it, it came up Tom Cruise tooth in center. And there's pictures that come up with lines going down the center of the picture to show you.
Yeah. Oh, it just looks like his face is slightly like off center. It doesn't. I was there's one picture where it looks real intense.
Oh, I got an article that came that said Tom Cruise teeth before and after he loses tooth. So maybe he had work done because he had an accident, and that's why. It is funny looking.
Yeah. So, do you have any last thoughts on allyship and
I'm for it, and I think it's important that people who can speak up about issues speak up about issues. People who like say you don't call everyone out all the time necessarily in your life. There's times where it's not appropriate, but when you can, you do. When you can spread word information on something, you do. You certainly don't take part in terrible things, but also just speaking up when it's time to speak up and making sure people listen to the right sources. Just say, hey, if you don't know about this, you should listen to the We Dissent podcast. That's 3 women activist lawyers talking about church and state issues. Like you don't have to listen to me talk about the Dow decision, but listen to them. They're really knowledgeable.
Yeah, I think that's good.
At Triangle Free Thought Society, because I don't plug my group often enough, which I am now officially president of. We had an election, officially president now. One of the things we try is when we're booking guests is to book guests who are experts in things that and are not like we try to be very inclusive in who we do, but it's not like identity politics. We want a black woman and we want a brown person, blah blah blah. We want people talking about topics that they are the experts in and they have the lived experience in. Like, we're not doing it because someone's black, but that's the person who's going to talk about that issue kind of thing. I don't need a white person to talk about black atheism.
Right. So I was listening to Cog Dis today, and I haven't gotten that far into it. And today's topic on there, or the discussion they were talking about was, I was doing this on the way to your house. They were talking about this, but Googling or doing your own research, right?
Don't do your own research, but yeah.
It's basically don't do your own research. But one of the things that they've said in the past, and this is kind of frustrating sometimes for us as a society, but they've mentioned it, and I'm going to fuck up how they said it, but like we have to defer to experts sometimes, and when it comes to certain things, we're getting to that point where we're not doing that on certain things where it's clearly obvious we should. Medical things, like scientific things. We're not deferring to experts on those things.
Even the ones where you don't want to defer. Because I had a thing recently, like currently, I may have comments on it right now on Facebook. Somebody posted something about why do we believe that there was a historical Jesus? There's no real evidence, blah, 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 blah. And I think it's an atheist group. And my response was, listen, the historical consensus is that there was someone who the stories of Jesus are based on. That's the historical consensus. And there's no amount of research I can do online. There's no articles I can read that are going to make me smarter than than the consensus of historians. Even if I see no reason to believe it, there's no reason that I have no expertise to doubt Bart Ehrman at Duke, who says there is. And I had someone who's like, well, my master's is in this, and here, read my article. I'm like, I just said, me reading your article doesn't make me and you smarter than the consensus of historians. Even though I personally don't see it, I have to admit they're smarter than me on this topic.
Yeah, I agree. Although time travel would be cool.
Yeah, if I can find, like, and if consensus changes, great. I will go with the
Yes.
consensus. Like,
Yep.
I'm not buying into a theory based on my knowledge. I'm accepting the consensus view of
Right.
what the experts in the field say.
And I think that's the attitude we need to have with allyship. What's where I was going with that is that, but it's hard if I can't say, if people as a society are going, well, vaccines, let's take the COVID vaccine out and just use the MMR vaccine for a second. That has been controversial for 20 years at least, probably
Well,
closer to 30.
controversial, depending how you define controversial, but yeah,
There's controversy around it. It's not it
uninformed
itself.
controversy. I'm
Yeah.
with you.
I'm not trying to give credence to that
Right.
controversy. I'm just saying the point I'm about to make is actually quite the opposite. But like, if we can't get people to go, oh, you know what, 99% of doctors show, and research has shown there is no problem here. If we can't get people to listen to that, how can I possibly get someone to listen to, hey, I know you're poor and white and you're trying to do the right thing, but this black person knows more what it's like to be black than you know, like what it is to be black. How that is such, even though it sounds like common sense to you and I'm sure that like a black person knows more about the black experience than we do. But that is less concrete to me than like, oh, the doctors have said there is, because you look at someone who's like very privileged, grown up in a situation where they can be kind of removed from the black experience, and then you grow up with someone
Yeah,
who's
I mean, you got
poor and
Mark
white.
Robinson, the Lieutenant Governor of North Carolina, who said, "I don't
Yeah,
consider myself African American because they're whiners."
yeah. So there are like, so it's what I mean. Like there's a less concreteness to that. So how can we possibly get that point through to some people who are trying to be good, that they can't
Yeah.
be the voice of it when I can be the voice of, like, look, there's a guy I follow who that I think you might like. His name's Walter Masterson,
I follow him.
and he had a video with RFK Jr. the other day where he had his dog, and he goes, "I got him vaccinated, and now he doesn't bark." And he and he because he's a troll for good, but like how the person who legitimately thinks something like that, how can they possibly like that is
Yeah, I mean, repetition, right?
yeah
The more people hear the right messages, the more likely that at some point some of them will sink in.
yeah
But it's also it's not about like every single black person is the expert, because like I said, some
right
people are not political and they don't pay attention to what goes on. But they know their lived experience, but it may not be.
yeah
It's more of
yeah
the consensus expert opinion is X, and I'd rather have
right
someone from that group expressing it than someone who doesn't have both the lived experience and the expertise.
right. I agree. That's what, yeah, because ultimately no group is a monolith, but at the same time I do not really understand what it is like to get pulled over or approached by a police officer as a black person. Like, and anything that the one thing that I can think of that even like makes, for a little while, made me think that I could understand it is ultimately comes from, like, I'll give you the example. When you're a teenager in a rich area and you have a shitty car and you get pulled over, cops treat you differently than they treat everyone else in that rich area, right?
Mm-hmm.
And for a long time I used to think like, well, that's probably what it's like to be black, only worse. And there is like a little bit of tiny little
Right.
piece of truth to
The
it.
only worse is a huge factor, though.
But
It's like,
yes,
I
yeah.
probably won't get shot by the cop who pulled me over.
Yeah, like you probably have more money than me, but you don't. But you having more money than me and uh, Jeffrey Bezos having more money than me,
Right.
that's a wide range. So, but yeah, so like I don't think I ever pulled that card or like tried to play that, but I did try. Like I could understand the idea of like, oh, sometimes people just get treated like less than. and but there was very little fear. I had very little, other than like I'm gonna get in trouble. I had very little. I had no fear for my safety. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like,
it's
so
different
I
between
don't.
intellectually knowing something and feeling it.
Yeah, yeah. So anyway, I just did that to point out how big of a douchebag I can be, because that's the episode's topic, is that if you're like me, if you're trying to be an ally but you're bad at it, you're a douchebag. No, I I just really want, and I get to the point where I try really hard to do it right, and to not be the guy who's like, well, I have black friends.
Yeah.
Like, I told Adam, I was talking to Adam one time, and I was like, if I'm in a conversation and so, like, I don't ever say that, and I'm like, because that immediately makes me sound like I don't actually have any black friends, or I have one black friend, and I'm like, so I will avoid that point. And he goes, he said something like, what do you say then in that situation? I'm like, I'll just, like, I'll talk about an actual experience that happened, like, what, conversation we had or something. And then sometimes people will ask if you are black, and then I'll be like, oh yeah, he's black. And I feel like that's my workaround. But like,
It's funny. It's funny when you feel like it's relevant to the conversation. So I have to say this person's black, but then I have to say, but it's relevant. You have to, like, it's important to know that Mac is black in the story, that I call him matzo ball and he calls me collard greens. Like, the fact that we reverse the ethnic slur is important to know that I'm Jewish and he's black. Like, that's part of the joke.
Yeah. Another friend of mine, not Adam. So I was telling today at work, I was talking about how Logan Logan doesn't know what the N word is. He knows that it's a bad word. It's a really mean word, but he hasn't heard it. And there's a little bit of me that worries, because I don't want to like teach him it, but I also don't want him to like hear it and then start saying it before he gets home and says, "I heard blah blah blah." And in the topic, and when I was having this conversation, I said, and I know he's heard it before, because I listen to rap music and I have a friend who says it a lot. And then I was telling this to a friend at work who is black, and she like gave me this look, and I said, he's black. And she goes, okay, you had me worried for a second. I'm like, no, I'm like, I don't hang out with anybody any white people who currently say the N-word basically at all. And I was like, as far as I know, you know what I mean? Like, but there was that moment of like me being like, yeah, my friend says the N-word all the time. Yeah. And then be like, oh yeah, no, without that context. All right. I think that'll do it for us, right?
Oh, that'll do you. Yep.
So you got any last words on the?
It's fine.
Oh, before we do that,
yeah.
We need to plug the cat's butt. If you are listening to this podcast on any of the regular podcast players, Spotify or Apple or anything, please hit the follow or subscribe buttons. Give us a thumbs up or a 5-star rating. Write a review if you can. If you liking the show. If you are watching us on YouTube, like, subscribe, add a comment. That would be excellent of you to do that. And then lastly, if liking and subscribing and supporting us in that way isn't enough for you, and you want to give us the gift of money, which will help us to improve the podcast, keep the podcast going, you can do that in 2 different ways. You can go to patreon.com/talking about the big stuff, and we have 2 options on there for different versions, which depending on content level. So it's a $3 and a $10. All episodes through there will come out on Monday instead of Friday, so you get them 4 days early. And then I'm forgetting and if for some reason you're on Apple and you prefer to do it through Apple's podcast system, you can just hit the subscribe button on there, and it's $3. It's $3. It will play the uncut version of this, or the less cut version of this.
And we promise that Mike will try to do this off the top of his head every week. We will not pre-record it. We will not write a script. We will not make sure that it is fluid and smooth. It will be pulled as if pulling teeth every week for your listening pleasure.
I'm going to write a script. It's just been crazy at work.
You know,
Christmas.
you need to just delete this. This needs to be that. This whole thing needs to be not on the Patreon and the Apple subscription feed. So the reason to subscribe is to never hear him talk about subscribing again. That's the reason to subscribe. Still, if you're watching on YouTube, hit the like, hit the notifications, hit subscribe. Do that on YouTube. But the other stuff, you never have to hear again. $3 a month, and you never have to hear again. Come on, less than the price of supporting a kid for Sally Struthers.
Yeah. All right. Anyway, now that I've been berated,
and I'll just say to everyone, thank you for listening to us talk about the big stuff and giving us your support as an ally.
The preceding podcast has been a Chocolate Diamond Media LLC production. Copyright 2023, all rights reserved.